this, though I have the evidence. Here is a book which we have in our ministry, In the Beginning, by Walt Brown, with a very extensive section about the testing of the dust on the moon. That was one of the arguments he brought up. Isaac Asimov said, "I get a picture, therefore, of the first spaceship picking out a nice level place for landing purposes, coming in slowly downward, tail first, and sinking majestically out of sight." Isaac Asimov, 14 million tons of dust per year, Science Digest, 1959, before they went to the moon. 1956, Raymond Littleton in The Modern Universe from New York, Harper and Brothers, said Littleton felt that the dust formed by only the erosion of exposed moon rocks by ultraviolet light and X-rays could, during the age of the moon, be sufficient to form a layer over it several miles deep of dust. So Littleton predicted in 1956. Thomas Gold proposed that thick layers of dust accumulate in the lunar maria, the lunar surface, again, from monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society of London, 1955. I can go on and on with quotes, but as far as the amount of moon dust that does come in, there's a very technical journal here, the technical notes on the moon dust, how much has been measured, and I'll be glad to make a copy and send this to you. I should have thought of that ahead of time. It's been a busy week. Herbert Zook of NASA was the man from U.S. National Aeronautics and Space Administration, had been intimately involved in estimating the thickness of the dust layer on the moon before the first Apollo moon landing. He helped analyze the lunar material brought back from the moon. Of the many interesting things he told me and sent me by mail, one is critical in answering the above question. NASA did not realize until the moon and dust rocks were analyzed that only 1 part in 67, 1.5%, of the debris of the moon came from outer space. The rest was pulverized moon rock. So 1% comes from outer space. So you've got an even more serious problem. If the dust layer was only about a ½ inch thick, and you can listen to the entire conversation available from NASA, or I've got it at home, of the guys when they landed on the moon, the first hour-and-a-half conversation, a lot of the conversation was about, where's all the dust? I talked to the man who created the backpack that Armstrong was carrying. He said, Mr. Hovind, he lives in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. He said, I was instructed to make the backpack dust-proof because NASA still seriously was worried about him sinking into the dust. They thought it would be a serious problem. You can take a look at the pictures and see the large lunar modules. What happened in 1972, after they'd been to the moon quite a few times, somebody revised the calculations of how much dust should be accumulating on the moon. But the technical notes I have here, which would take a long time to go through, indicate in 4.6 billion years, figuring in a factor of 67 to 1, which is the amount that's actually found there, the dust layer would be 1,033 feet deep if the moon were, and I'll be glad to send you all this stuff. If you'd like this book's available, and it's none of my stuff's copyrighted, you can copy it and send it back, get your money back, and I'll have the book. Thank you.
Final one. Well, I have your quotation out of your seminar notebook, at least part of it. You talk about a 1954 measurement, and I don't know where you got the other ones or what they were doing. We did have a space program in between time. The typical citation is from a 1960 paper of dust coming on Mauna Kea or something like that. Now, if we can flip to the next one, the real rate of dust accumulation is way lower than that. And the upper limit on the amount of dust would have been possibly in the area of 10 centimeters high. You find one of, like you said, 1.5% space dust plus the regolith, no more than 15 centimeters high. I'm sure going to the moon was a very traumatic thing, and the astronauts were probably worried about a lot of stuff. But do you seriously think that we would have sent someone to the moon if they had been able, thought to have had to cope with 500 or 1,000 feet of dust? It just doesn't make any sense.
I will certainly send you those quotes, and you can deal with those people who said, what you gave here is an example that you said might give 10 centimeters of dust, which is about 3 inches. Was only, if you call her slide back up there, could you do that, the one you just had? I don't get to discuss this one? She only gave one dust particle size. There's lots of sizes coming into the moon. Anyway, well, let's see. And all my questions have to come from my notebook. Let's see. Could you please explain, question 13, when, where, why, and how did single-celled plants become multicelled? And where are the two-celled or three-celled or four-celled organisms in the world? Why do we have nothing that is two-celled? We go from single-celled to multi-celled. How did they make this jump, please?
Go ahead. That's pretty easy. Volvox, gonium. Gonium has 4 or more cells. There's no specialization. Volvox has hundreds of cells embedded in jelly. Some are modified for reproduction. If you're looking for intermediate forms, these are 2 perfect intermediate forms that happen to still be around. When did they go to multicellular? Well, there's evidence in the fossil record of multicellular algae about 800 million years. I don't know what the big deal is about having 2 of them. I've got 4 of them right here. In 1 billion to 700 million year old rocks in China, Norway, India, and Canada, we find these multicellular algae. The first land plants, 450 million years ago. The first vascular plants, 408 million years ago. There is a progression with plants as well as animals.
What you gave was an example of a colony or several cells working together. We have the same thing here in a city with several people working together, some doing different jobs. That is not an answer to the question of how did it evolve. Finding something in a rock layer, we still have these creatures that you showed on the screen alive today. They're still here. So finding them in a fossil record, which I think I showed you pretty clearly, the fossil record is based on circular reasoning, is not evidence at all. And that finding them in a colony, several cells working together for a common good, is still not the same thing as a tissue or an organism. So I think you did not answer that question at all as far as how single-celled creatures became multicellular. Because there is no answer to this. As any biologist who understands their stuff will tell you, we don't know. We think it happened because we're here, but that's not science. That is religion, which is my whole point. It's all based on something you have to believe. You think it happened, you're welcome to think that. But nobody should be allowed to use taxpayers' dollars to spread that kind of propaganda in our school system. That's not science. Am I supposed to ask a question?
Oh, sure.
Your information concerning measurements of stellar distances is outdated, to say the least. What is your basis for restricting parallax measurements to only, I believe you said, 20 to 100 light years, and possibly ignoring all the other types of distance measurements completely?
The way star distances are measured, I cover pretty thoroughly on my question-answer tape number 7. I don't have time to give you all the details on that now. But to measure star distance, you have to have 2 observation points if you want to measure it with parallax. And it appears to me like by your question you are admitting that they really only can measure through parallax distance, as trigonometry, a short distance. Maybe 20 light years. Some textbooks say 100. That's a stretch. And I've got the actual measurements in my seminar notebook, or I can show you pictures of that if we have time. But if you have 2 observation points on opposite sides of the sun, opposite sides of Earth's orbit around the sun, is 16 light minutes across. Now, how you could tell in June where you used to be in January across the orbit of the sun, how you can tell that precisely, I find to be a big question. I don't think you can tell exactly where you were 6 months ago opposite side of the sun. But even assuming you can, you're 16 light minutes apart. 1 light year is 525,900